welcome to yet another, I think, challenging and interesting session hosted by Thabo and his guest. He'll introduce her. I'm not going to go there. Safe to say, I think these sessions are, an opportunity to be exposed to and explore really new ideas. And hopefully, together with Thabo and Lana, we're going to go into a conversation and not just have, a presentation. I think the idea is to be cognizant that the world of work is changing and that the future really is largely unknown. The rate of change is just so rapid. And I think what these conversations are about, that Thabo is curating around this changing world of work, is how can we be best prepared and equipped for a future that is unknown and uncertain? And what could we and what should we be doing while we're still at school? And I guess the conversation has two parallel sides. The one is for the educators. What is your responsibility and your duty in preparing the learners and being aware of this changing future? And to learners yourselves, what should you do to be self-aware, to self-educate, to be better equipped for this future unknown that is changing rapidly around us? And I think today's conversation is to take us into that space. It's going to delve around the sphere of creativity. And I think all of us are champions of creativity in the sense that creative people solve problems. Creative people think out of the box. Creative people find inspiration where other people don't know, where to look. And I certainly am a big adherent and believer that in creativity, in thinking differently, in looking at problems in a different way that other people see them, we are going to find solutions and champions. So let me hand over to Thabo and welcome him again and thank him for hosting the session. He's always got this knack of finding really great and interesting speakers. So we hope to have a very interesting conversation with Lana. So Thabo, over to you and welcome again.
Oh, thank you, Clifford. And it's by, I suppose, fate and somewhat by chance that I get to meet these interesting people. So just some quick housekeeping before we get started with the session. I guess the most important thing to remember is the fact that this session is for you. So we'd like for you to engage with us as much as possible, meaning there will be time for Q&A once Lana and I are done having a conversation, or even during the session. If you've got a question, please feel free to type it into the chat. And then we'll stop the conversation there and Lana will try to answer your question as best to her capabilities as possible. And we hope you enjoy this session. And with that, let's get started around our session today, which centers around the fact that creativity matters. So before we get started, I've got the daunting task of introducing Lana, and she's probably got a resume and bio that's probably as long as the richest square mile in South Africa, being Sandton. So I tried my best, Lana, to encapsulate.
Little as you can.
Okay, cool. So let's get started. Let me introduce Lana quickly. So Lana is the CEO of Goats to Unicorns, as well as FemTali, or the FaithMangope Technology and Leadership Institute for Young Women. So Lana is an innovative entrepreneur with a strong creative energy. She's a results-driven and an award winner. She co-founded her first business, CQS TechnologyHoldings, in '98. At the age of 33, she sold her shares in CQS for a substantial amount, which she still till this day does not want to even share with me a bit. But anyway, I've moved past that. She was nominated as one of the most influential businesswomen in the financial space in 2000 and won numerous awards overseas for being a top speaker in her subject matter on financial forensic technology. Now, she went on to invest and consult to various startup and semi-mature fintech companies or businesses. Many of these companies have reached great success, and some of them have been sold for profitable amounts. A few years ago, Lana began studying courses through IDEO, which is the world's largest leading design thinking agency worldwide. which started her on a quest to understand whether creativity can be taught. Her findings led her to founding Goats to Unicorns, which is a creativity and innovation catalyst. So Lana delves deep into the attributes and skills needed in the workplace to be innovative and remain relevant. Lana also assists leaders in leaders in companies, business managers, individuals, and entrepreneurs to reignite their creativity muscle in order to make sure they become competitive players in this here 4IR or fourth industrial revolution. Lana is a Genius Ignitor at IGY, so Innovator Gap Year Programme, run by the 21st Century Humans, and is a facilitator at Duke Corporate Education and the CEO of, as I said, Femtali, which is a non-profit looking to enhance the lives of PDI young women in the 21st century. And lastly, Lana's passion is helping to build sustainable human beings who are passionate contributors to the world of work. So ladies and gents, please join me in welcoming Lana. So Lana, welcome.
Thanks. You're supposed to bridge that.
That was the extremely abridged version.
Okay.
So Lana, let's, I guess, start off our conversation by giving us a brief overview of who you are. How would you describe Lana? Who is Lana?
Who's Lana? So, yeah, Lana is foremost a mother, a wife, a daughter, an entrepreneur. And as you said in the last sentence of the introduction, is Lana's purpose and why I wake up in the mornings is literally to help build sustainable human beings that can become contributors, economic contributors to society, because I believe once you give people the opportunity to earn a living, it makes a difference not only to them, to their families, to their communities, and then actually to a continent as a whole. So that is Lana, just a person with a passion who wants to really change the way that people are educated and the way that people can earn a living in this 21st century.
So I guess to take a bit of a step back, how did you get into what it is that you do, Lana? Because part of your bio speaks about the fact that you did a course with IDEO. So how did that whole thing even start for you to find out about IDEO and be interested in creativity and whether or not it could be taught? So talk us through how that came about.
So it's an interesting story. My son, who is currently in grade 9, he's privileged to be in a private school, but is struggling with the current system. And he's just, he's very clever, he's academically strong in things that he is passionate about, but struggling. He has ADHD, I think it's actually ADD, sorry, ADD. He really has been struggling with being able to manage the school system. And I was doing some research and I came across a gentleman by the name of Sir Ken Robinson. And as any of your educators might know him as one of the most famous UK educationalists in the world. And his topic or his TED talk caught my attention, and that was how schools kill creativity. And wow, that just blew my mind. And I read his article and I said, sure, finally someone understands, what I feel and what I believe is wrong with the school system. And funny enough, that led me on, because on the other side, you always got the other side of YouTube who gives you alternative talks, were the speakers or the CEOs of IDEO, which is the largest design thinking agency. And that's how I actually got to IDEO. I started watching some of their talks, and they were talking about creativity at Stanford University. And I remember the CEO of IDEO saying to the kids at Stanford, saying, just imagine that we have a group of people who go to work, and that most people go to work with a 10% creativity genius level. And I'll give you an experiment that was done a while ago to show you that. And he said, imagine we came and helped people build the skill of creativity, and we upped their creativity to like 50, 60%. He said, companies that have people in their organization who are creative individuals or who think creatively, they won't have any competition because they will outdo any other company known to mankind. And that just started me on my journey of researching, investigating. And when I say that, I mean, what has happened to our creativity? Why do we actually have to reignite our creativity? Creativity then on the other side sits as the number one skill in the workplace at the moment. So according to LinkedIn's current 2020 survey, creativity is number one in their skills their skills survey. And
so just on that, Lana, sorry to interrupt you.
No, please.
Give us a view around what number creativity was 5 or 10 years prior to that, just so that we have a view around how far up creativity actually moved up along the years.
So I would say 10 years ago, creativity didn't even feature on a list. Probably about 6-7 years ago, it was number 10. So in 2015, according to the World Economic Forum Future of Jobs report, it was number 10 on the list. In 2020, it moved to, accordingly to World Economic Forum, it's now in the top 1 or 2 skills needed. It's the biggest skill that has jumped in terms of skills needed in the workplace. And I guess the question now one asks is why?
Yeah.
So I don't know if you're happy for me to just proceed on that.
Why
Okay.
is
So let me start you off with an interesting experiment done by Professor George Land in the 1970s. He was a consultant for NASA, and they had asked him to please put together some form of creativity test to test the creativity of their engineers, their astronauts, or their scientists. And they found it very useful, and his project that he did really was successful in that regard. And what's interesting is he decided to run a longitudinal study with kids. And he gave that same test that he gave to the astronauts or to NASA to 5-year-old kids. Do you know those kids scored a 98% creativity genius level?
Wow.
He ran the same experiment 5 years later, and when these kids were 10 years old, gave them the same test to the same kids, it had dropped to 30%. He gave that same test when they were 15 and it dropped to 12%. And finally, as adults who wrote that same test, same kids that were that had originally written it, and it dropped to 2%.
Wow.
And what he concluded was that we are educated out of creativity.
Yeah.
We are all born creative geniuses, but we are educated out of creativity. And if you noticed, Hubble, that when is the biggest change is literally from 5 to 10. And that's when we enter the school system. So at 6 years old, we enter the school system. And the problem is we are taught convergent thinking as we enter the school system, as opposed to divergent thinking, which we can speak through a bit later. So with having that background, most of us are sitting with a 2% creativity genius level. And I must make sure that you understand the difference between creativity as a skill and creativity as a gift. So creativity's gift can be someone who's born with the ability to be the most magnificent painter or ballet dancer. Some of us just have that true gift to paint beautifully. But creativity is a skill. It's something that we need in order to survive in this world, in order to remain competitive. And more than ever, we have digital, or we have artificial intelligence that's going to start becoming more and more apparent in our day-to-day lives. And at this moment, creativity is one of the few skills that AI cannot do, because AI is set boundaries, whereas creativity is thinking and taking and expanding those particular boundaries.
Yes.
And just why is creativity so important, sitting at the number one skill? Creativity equals mental freedom. Most of us are mentally incarcerated. What do I mean by that? Is that when, and you'll see it with kids a lot and with students and with everyone, you say, just think of another idea. Someone else has thought that idea, and they sit there and they all look at you with blank faces. I say, anyone, come on, think of an idea.
Yeah.
And they shake their head. Or people who have just been retrenched now, you know, what's the first thing that people say? What else am I going to do? This is what I've done for the past 20 years. You know, this is all I know. Mental freedom is the ability to think and come up with many different ideas. And if you have that skill of creativity, you will never feel mentally incarcerated.
Yes.
And you will live a much more happier and motivated life accordingly.
Yeah. So just as you're speaking there, Lana, I've got a question and a comment for you. So the first, I guess, thing I want to bring up is more the comment. So what you just spoke about actually reminds me of this here. So the marshmallow test, or the marshmallow tower. So what's interesting about this test is that it's normally run with, I guess, executives across the globe, where the only materials they use is a certain number of spaghetti strings or sticks, a bit of sellotape or masking tape, and a marshmallow. And the aim of this game is for you to build the tallest tower by using spaghetti. And the funny thing is, when running this test with executives, they do terribly, because you're supposed to get the tower to stand while you put the marshmallow on top. So the tower shouldn't fall down at all. So top executives do the worst in this. And number two, the worst people at this test apparently are business students. So MBA type students fail this test. But the people or individuals that excel at it the most are kids, kindergarten kids or kids in creche. And the point of that illustration, I suppose, is to illustrate the fact that creativity, I suppose, in a way, from what I'm getting from you, is that it gets beaten out or phased out of us because of the education system. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. Now, the second thing is, with regards to the examples that you just mentioned now, one of the things that I'd really like to understand is, you're speaking about creativity and its importance, but what does Lana actually do? So how do you, so firstly, one, do you harness or help in bringing out creativity in individuals? And secondly, how do you do it? So what does Lana do from a creativity perspective?
Okay.
Before Lana answers that question, Thabo, do you have any pictures of what all of those very clever executives and business students built?
100%.
Marshmallows. Won't you show? Because I'm very interested. It will make the concept very visible of maybe what little kids built and what those highly skilled execs built. I think it might be quite fun if you've got that. Maybe you can find it while Lana's talking.
No problem. Let me search quickly. Cool.
So interesting. I actually run a similar experiment when I work with corporates. Is I give them literally a piece of cardboard, and I say to them, build a box. And they look at me as if I'm mad. I say to them, a simple box. That's all I want you to build. A simple box, something that can hold something. Because now I also get the questions, does it have to hold? Does it open on this side? I get like thousands of questions. I say, just build a box. And I always say, it's amazing. If I gave the same box, the same piece of cardboard to some children, they'd be doing it in 2 seconds. And this is the problem. So, Thabo, just to answer your question in terms of how do we build this creativity muscle? How do we go about? And just think back now. I've given you the story of this Professor George Land. And if I look at when did we have the highest creativity levels of? It's when we are 5. So it's not that difficult to actually to look and understand what are the attributes that a 5-year-old has or a young child has that we don't possess anymore. And with that, I developed a DECOM methodology, which is a diet plan, which is an exercise plan to actually start to reignite our creativity. And I refer to it, it's the same as if you are trying to get a 6-pack stomach. You're going to have to go to a dietitian. You're going to have to go to the gym. You're going to have to put a plan together in order to get to that goal of that 6-pack. So creativity now is exactly the same. It's a muscle. It's the prefrontal dorsal cortex that is here, that has contracted as we've gone into the school system, and now it needs to expand. And it's, as I said, a muscle. So what does the DECOM methodology actually stand for? So it's different practices, and the first one is that of divergent thinking. Divergent thinking is what I mentioned earlier, obviously the opposite to convergent thinking. And convergent thinking is basically our school system. They teach us to think in a particular way. And I like to use the example, I don't know if there are any maths teachers here, but in maths, and I'm seeing it more and more because my daughter's in matric and I'm watching her maths, and the other day I attended my son's extra maths lesson that he had. And we are taught a formula. So we're not given x plus 2x plus y equals whatever and solve for x and any way we want. We are actually taught a formula. We are told to use this formula in order to get to the answer. So that's convergent thinking. They are telling us how to think in order to achieve a specific goal. Think of it, I often get asked by teachers, how do I make my children more creative in their creative writing? And I say to them, look what you do. You basically tell them how to write, what to write with, on what to write. You tell them that you have to give them boundaries. You tell them a topic. You tell them how many paragraphs it must have. It must have an intro, this. Then you tell them how many quotes it must have. Then it must have this amount of synonyms, and you must use, by that time, this is what you've done to their thinking. You want to see creative writing, you've got to give them less boundaries. You've got to give them divergent thinking. Let them think of the way that, I've got this thing from Trevor that most of you are maths teachers, so don't switch off now. It's not the way. I'm looking at ways to understand how we actually allow for children to be able to think, or as adults. So D is divergent thinking. I always like to use the example of umbrella. And I say we go around the room and say, okay, here's an umbrella. What? Give me 15 alternative uses for an umbrella. Their first thing is they think, I don't know. And then they start to come up with. And the first 3 ideas are always common ideas that most people would think of. It's getting past those first 3 ideas where you start to actually use your creative, your dorsal prefrontal cortex.
Yeah.
So that's the D. The C stands for challenging assumptions and curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
Think of a young child.
Yeah.
What was the question, Thabo, that young children ask the most? And what was the one word that is a question word?
Why?
Why?
Yeah.
Why do I have to go to sleep at 10 o'clock now? Why do can't I stick my fingers in the
wall socket?
Why do I have to? And it's wonderful because they are curious, they're exploring, and by doing that, you are able to take on different challenges. And as we enter the school system, or even as our parents, as we get older, our parents stop asking why. Stupid question. Just listen to me. This is the way it is. This is the way it's been, and this is the way it is always be. And I like to use the example of I do with some of my students. Why do we work 8 hours a day? So accordingly, I know some of us work more than 8, some of us work less than 8, but in terms of a standard work day, if you go into an organization, you sign a work day from 9 to 5 with a half an hour lunch.
Yeah.
And I say to them, why do we work 8 hours? Why not 4? Why not 20? Why not 3?
Yeah.
And this is the questioning, because the 8-hour workday actually started in the first industrial revolution. And what happened is machines came onto being, and those machines ran 24 hours because the electricity, to shut down the electricity was impossible. So they had to get 3 shifts of 8 hours each. And that's actually where the 8-hour workday came from. We are now in the industrial revolution, and we are so-called working still 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
And I mean, we need to start questioning why. And companies now, such as Microsoft, especially they've done this experiment in Japan, are changing the 5-day work week to 4-day work week. And they're noticing that the productivity is definitely improving. And so we've got to ask why. And we've got to let the students and the people ask why. Because that's when their curiosity is growing. That's when it's allowing their muscle, their creativity muscle, to expand. We then go on to the O, which is observation. And the truth be told, we have lost the ability to observe. We are too busy. We are too busy multitasking, doing so many things that we don't even observe what's going on around us. And I run these hundreds of different experiments with students, with adults, just to show them how unobservant they are.
Yes.
Because if you're not observing what's going on around you, and you're tunnel vision, and you're only looking like this, how can you expect to be creative?
100%.
And lastly, the M in the methodology stands for what we call mashing up, or conceptual blending. So what happens with our brains? When we learn a particular information, what we do is we store them in boxes. So if we're learning about fruits, if we're learning about vegetables, if we're learning about history, if we're learning about dogs, what we do is we take all that information and we store it in a box. Box labeled fruit, box labeled vegetables, box labeled whatever it might be. And when we need to recall that information, we're good. We're good regurgitators. We go to our brain, we find a fruit box, and we bring that. So Clifford, can I unmute you for 2 seconds, and I'm going to ask you a quick question. So
that means I've got to pretend I've been listening.
Okay. Now I can test you. So Clifford, just tell me, name as many types of birds as possible. This is an easy question, eh?
Small birds, big birds, flying birds, swimming birds.
Okay, I was looking for more like sparrow, cockatoo, parrot.
I needed a bit more forewarning. Like, language has left me. Yeah. Put someone else on the spot.
Okay, no. I've got to finish with you. I've got to continue. So what's happening is that what is going on is you're going to your brain and you're coming back and giving me the different birds. But now if I turn the question around and say and tell me a bird is an example of?
A bird is an example of fantastic engineering solution, of evolution that could fly and respond to its conditions in various ways. Different birds have different capabilities that are suitable to meet their requirements. They are varied and they're different.
So Clever is giving us really intense answers. But I was just looking for something like a bird is an example of love or peace, or something we eat, or something that has wings, or that's something that's an animal. But
I'm one of those execs that built those towers that didn't stand. I was outperformed by a 3-year-old.
Oh, thank you, Clifford. So what I'm trying to prove there is that we're really good at regurgitating information that we store in a box. What we're not so good at is coming out of that box. Because now the question I ask, for example, a bird is an example of, you can't find that answer in one box. You have to go and search a number of different boxes. And this is where the magic happens. And when Steve Jobs speaks about creativity is just about connectivity, about connecting different things, that's all it is. It's a matter of taking odd and unusual things and putting them together to come up with new ways and new things. And in my workshops I run, and I give so many different examples, but I literally could say to you, here's a pen, here's a cell phone. What new product could you create by mashing these two up together? Or if I had glasses and you can see I've got two pairs of glass and in your pen, what new product could you come up straight away with? You know, maybe special glasses that can do writing on them and something or other. And this is the ability to start mashing up. And it's a wonderful exercise with children to start mashing up and bringing two things as you start a lesson and saying, right, here's this and this, let's mash it up together. So this is where we start off with this decom methodology, with those practices, because each one of those practices starts to expand this muscle that really over the years have been that has contracted, and we literally just have to kickstart it again. And that's the skill.
Okay, cool. So for a second now, well, I've got another question for you there, Lana, but I want to do this quickly so I can quickly show Clifford. So this here is basically what the marshmallow challenge is about. Like I said, the spaghetti, the tape, the string, as well as the marshmallow. And those are executives trying to build this tower. They work together in building this tower. Some examples of the tower, and you'll see where the common mistake or the common downfall is in building this tower. So the problem is that they don't really prototype that well, because the typical process is they want to start. So you're given 18 minutes to do this thing. And what happens is the team wants to orientate themselves, decide who's going to lead the exercise, etc. You want to plan, draw what this thing is going to look like, and then we build. Ta-da, we've got it. But the problem is the marshmallow then makes the tower fall down. So the marshmallow is always the last consideration by senior execs. And like I said, the people that consistently perform poorly, business school graduates as well as executives. And those who perform well, as you can see, look at some of the structures that the kids come up with. Purely because, why? It's the fact that they, funny enough, they don't. The thing is, they don't look at it from a traditional sort of approach, because when you look at business students and execs, they build and then only put the marshmallow on. Whereas with the kindergarten students or the kids that go to creche, throughout the entire life cycle, the marshmallow features. So the marshmallow features, and they continue to build while the marshmallow is on top of the tower. Now, the thing with that is, well, I guess not even the thing. So this is, I guess, an example of one of the clients that we did this with, and this was them building it. And just want to, this was also a diagram of it. And this is what it ended up looking like. Yeah. Let me just make sure I share properly here, because I really want to show you what it looked like. Right, as I was saying, this is what it ended up looking like. And it was like a proper trial and error sort of thing. So it didn't look like that from the beginning. So it fell a couple of times before they were able to raise it. So yeah, that is pretty much the marshmallow challenge. And there's some key lessons in that around creativity and how you perceive things or your overall outlook. Now, the thing for me, Lana, is from a tangible perspective, what sorts of, I guess, results do you get from a business perspective? Because you work with both, yes, individuals as well as businesses. So what sort of, I guess, benefit do organizations and individuals realize out of their creativity muscle being honed a lot more or growing throughout the process?
Yeah. So just I also work with schools. So just I'll come back to that just now. But in terms of corporates, and by the way, Thabo, if I was running that session, I'd remove that tape from the experiment. Because tape is very easy.
Yeah.
It's how they could now do it without tape. They would start to see their creativity really, because now they'd have to come up. So that's what we call pushing a boundary beyond and seeing what they could do. So what are the benefits in terms of creativity? Well, I think the first one I mentioned was this mental freedom. And I think that one is key because currently businesses, I mean, it couldn't be more applicable now through these COVID challenging economic times. So many businesses have been put out of business. So many businesses have had to re-engineer or change the way in what they were doing. And this is why the first thing of mental freedom is your key thing. We are so anxious. So our anxieties are the highest it's ever been. There are so many issues emotionally that we are facing. But those people who feel that they can and have opportunity and that there is this mental freedom will automatically start to become more confident, happier individuals who will be able to take an idea to value. We then, are looking at, when you're doing something on a day-to-day basis, you become stuck and rigid in your way. And you need to think of different ways and different ideas to do your job. So let me take, you have an accountant, I often get asked by accountants or people who come into my sessions, well, I don't really need to be creative, not in the type of thing that I do. But I say to them, it's not just about your technical skills. You need to be able to also think of different ways of being able to present the information, to be able to, look, we don't want them to be too creative in how they present the numbers, that they actually distort them, fraudulently distort them. But every single profession requires people to be creative because it also motivates people. How many of us go to work sometimes, or corporate people going to work, they're just demotivated. They just have no motivation. And it's so important just to be able to change the way that you are able to see things and look at things. And in a school situation, how many times do you hear the kids say, or, I mean, I've got my own kids, so I can speak from personal experience. Oh, got to go to the lesson, and how was school? So boring. What did you do? Same thing. I get, how was school? Good. How was your day? Good. Anything exciting happen? No. These are young kids. These are kids that are growing and learning and on this highest steep learning curve than they've ever been. And because we are setting so many boundaries for these young adults and for these young children too soon, that at the end of the day, they are lacking that motivation. And that motivation comes back to creativity. When you give a child a project or something to do that's completely unique and different to something that they are doing in class, how more motivated are they? How more excited are they? And it's no different in the corporate, that they come into work tunnel visioned in the same way they've always done things. We are creatures of habit. By nature, we are creatures of habit. We like to park in the same parking. We like to do this. And we need to start expanding this muscle so that we are able to stop being these creatures of habit and actually start living life to the fullest. The reason we are so stressed at this moment, the reason that we are so anxious and going through so much turmoil as a country, as a whole, as a world at this moment, is that people are so used to habitual, rote ways of living. And it's time. The time has come, and it's now. to start asking those important questions, why, to start experimenting, to start changing the way that we do things. Because if we don't, this country, this world is going to end up not in a place where we want to be and that we want to live. So that is how it is changing corporates. And yes, how does it change the corporates I work with and that I've been with? Well, they become more innovative. They want to become more innovative. They're coming up with new ideas. I have companies phoning me on a daily basis to say, you do not understand how many ideas that we were able to come up with, based on a specific challenge that we were facing. And when I work with companies, schools, or whatever, we actually work on particular challenges. So I don't make this hypothetical. We say, here's a challenge facing your organization at the moment. So for example, Discovery that I was doing some work with, interesting, this was just before COVID. They were having this meeting challenge, just having too many meetings. And one of our challenges was, how do we cut meetings to half the amount of time? And we solved that creatively. And by the time COVID came, they were ready, way ahead of looking at ways. And that means that people just are happier individuals.
100%.
So that really was a teaser. What was the answer?
The answer to?
Having less meetings.
Length and amount of meetings.
Oh, so how did they reduce? Funny enough, this was all before Zoom, hey, and everything going out. This was the ability to meet. First it was to cut the meetings down in a time basis, because we realized if you make it an hour, you will spend an hour in a meeting. If you make it half an hour, you'll get the same amount done, but in a shorter amount of time. So it was reducing the time of the meeting. It was Zoom, as I said, before Zoom was a big thing, before COVID. And I'll have to look at some of the other stuff that we came up with. But the change management unit that I was working with, well, they were called the change management unit. They were responsible for the way that people meet. And I'll have to refer back to my notes to see what they came up with. Some of the stuff that I could just think of offhand was it's cutting the time. It was sending other individuals into meetings, but they were nice creative ones that they came up with.
Okay. Cool. So just before you got into the the corporate bit of things, you spoke about the fact that you work with schools. Would you like to share a bit around that?
Okay, so schools are my passion, because everything begins at a school level, and everything begins, Adwa, where you're talking about early childhood development. So truthfully, at a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old level, that's exactly what they should be, children. We are trying to educate our children too quickly in boundary type of work. So we're trying to teach them math, and we're trying to get them to be convergent thinkers too soon. We've got to let them be divergent thinkers. We've got to let them experiment. We've got to let them come in and give them a box for the day. And that's the lesson. All you have to do is give them a box and say, right, for the rest of the day, here's a box. Create what you want to from this box. Play games with these boxes. Or here's an umbrella. I wouldn't give young kids an umbrella maybe, because I'll hit each other. But see what they do with it. Give them teaspoons and say, right, let's do exactly what Taba was doing with the marshmallow. Here's teaspoons and marshmallows. Let's build towers. And the more that you start in the early childhood, let them play. Let them use their imagination. Let their imagination run wild. Don't tell them that's not practical. That's not good. That's not going to work. Don't. Let them believe in theories. Let them believe in whatever they want to. Let them ask the questions why. Answer their questions. Give them indication. So that is key in early child development, is to let them play. Let them use their imagination. We then obviously need to move on from grade 1 to what we call a literacy phase. So if I could actually rewrite the school system, I would have 3 phases. It would be the literacy phase, so obviously the younger phase, so that would be imagination play. Literally coming to school, learning to work with one another, learning to collaborate in little teams, like those basic skills. The second phase is that of literacy. So we need to give children basic literacy, whether it's English literacy, whether it's mathematical or financial literacy, like, and that should include things like coding. Like for me, coding should be part of the math system. It shouldn't be a separate thing on its own. Math should now be falling part. I mean, coding should be part of a math system because it is the way of thinking. It's problem solving. It's critical thinking. It's a bit of philosophy, which we want to put into it. It helps a lot. And in those beginning years, we should do subjects that are fun, that teach them in a fun way. How do you do that? You use invention. So if you want to teach history, for example, South African history, for example, I would do plays. I would make them my plays and do research and find key individuals and people, and not give them a textbook. I die when I see my children or people arrive with their textbooks, you know. Go let them read. There are so many books out there. They don't need a textbook. They can research. Truthfully, everything is online. They can teach themselves everything online these days. So now you need, as teachers, you need to be more than just transferring information, because information now is available everywhere. It's how you now transfer that information to the students, in what way, in what creative ways that you allow them to actually experiment, feel, understand, as I said, question, be curious about that information. That now is really important to grow their creativity. They do not need to have these major textbooks. They do not need to be writing, regurgitating things. That is just technical information. And yes, we have to learn basics, and that's why I call it literacy. And then the second phase should be that around experimentation. You should be able to experiment. And why is experiment so important? What is the biggest thing that people fear? And that's failure. Why can't we be creative? Is because we fear failure. We don't like to fail. And come on, you know, as our children enter the school system, that's the first thing that's ingrained in them. Don't you come back with a failed mark. Anything over 50% is a fail. And the minute that we don't exceed, or we don't excel in something, we think we're failures.
Yes.
And that's so untrue. So for me, if you want to help, is stop worrying about this failure and these assessments. If I had my way, we would never do like write exams. We would actually just have to do certain assessments to understand that they have a clear understanding of the concepts that they've learned, not that they can regurgitate the information, you know. And it's that experimentation and that ability to fail that will make them creative individuals and prepare these individuals for life in the big world, so to speak. And then I would have third phase in education would be specialization, is that taking something that you're passionate about. And that's also, when you're a child, understand their passion. My son has a passion for technology, for specifically cars and electric cars and cellular technology. If they could just harness his learning experience, whether it's English, whether we could make it more, make learning experience more personalized for our children and allow them to experience that personalized education in a way that they enjoy. So if he got comprehensions about that, I promise you his English mark will go up by 30% because he's interested to read that information. So harness children's passion, understand their passion, speak to them, have conversations, philosophy is key to creativity as well.
Yeah.
Philosophy should be a key subject. So these are all, you know, different ways that as a teacher, you have to start preparing them for this fourth IR. They cannot do the same things that they have always done, otherwise they're going to end up not where they want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And as educators, and I hope, Odwa, I've answered your question, is in terms of childhood or early childhood, let them play, let them experiment, let them have fun, let them ask why, give them freedom. Don't come and put boundaries on them so soon. But I know what everyone's going to say here, but we still got to get matrics out at the end of the year. We still got to write exams. So more than ever, you have to start to be creative in what you have got and what you have to do. So yes, we have to write exams and produce assessments at the end of the year to make sure the children pass. We know that, and we have to get through that work. But try in many different ways that I've spoken about. Use different methods. Use observation, use curiosity, practice divergent thinking. Do mashing up. To me also, subjects should not be independent. Exactly what I was saying to Clifford, is that we shouldn't learn in boxes. Things should be mashed up. You should bring in geography and biology together. Like my son is also interested in being an astronaut. So he should be learning about science and geography together, not separate subjects. So that's a fun way to now, as teachers, we should start speaking with each other and saying, how can we teach these subjects? But let's take astronaut or astronomy. Let's teach science, physics, and geography, whatever, together. So those are just a few that I'm trying to fit into a very short period of time that hopefully will help.
Yeah. Okay, cool. No, that's cool. Because you answered the next question that I had for you, which was around whether or not creativity should be taught in school and how educators can potentially start. So
100% needs to be taught.
100%. So in addition to that, I guess I have two last questions for you, Lana. The one question is, tell us a bit around Femtali and what it is that Femtali seeks to achieve.
Okay. So Femtali is the FaithMangope Tech and Leadership Institute for Young Women, previously disadvantaged women. What we have done is we are teaching software programming skills, but in the most unique way. So we are incorporating life core skills, personal mastery, and technical skills together, because we are trying to build sustainable young women in the industry, either as entrepreneurs or as employees. And what do we mean by sustainable? They've got to like what they're doing. They've got to be passionate about going out and doing it. Otherwise, all we're doing is training them in software programming, and it becomes a means to an end. We want people who are really going to fulfill and to actually contribute passionately to what they want to do. Because if they do that, they become sustainable. They then see the end goal. They know where they go. And in this course, we do critical thinking, creativity, complex problem. We do work readiness. We do personal mastery. We go as much as looking at what's the feminine and masculine essence. You know, what makes up females and males, because that is quite unique from a female and a male when you talk about the essence. So it's a 6-month program that is full-time. For this particular cohort that we're working with now is a full-time cohort, but sometimes we do it part-time as well. And I mean, these girls just love coming to class. For the past 2 days, we've literally had no Wi-Fi, and the messages that I have got being so angry and upset that they can't come is just testament to what we are being able to offer them. We also use, which is different, we use people who are in corporate a lot to come and train these young ladies, such as yourself, Tabo, and such as other key individuals who have experience working in corporates. And then lastly, what we do is we mash everything up. We take the technology that they've learned, and they have to devise, or they have to come up with a program, a solution. So for example, it will work with First for Women, and they have to come up with a gender-based violence app that helps women at night be able to feel safe. So based on what they've learned in software programming, whether it's app development, whether it's web development, whatever they've learned, cloud computing, they use that skill then to build this app for gender-based violence that they then go and present to First for Women Insurance to say, this is what we've got. So it is so practical. And this is also for schools. Like everything that you teach, try and make it as applicable and practical as to how what they are learning actually affects them in a day-to-day life. So whether it's history, bring it into a way that when you're teaching apartheid or you're teaching things, how is it applicable now? By learning this, why is this going to make a difference in your life? And that's also, think, before you teach something, don't just teach it. Think how, at the end of the day, is this going to be applicable? And this is what we do with Fintali. Fintali is headed by FaithMangope. She's a news reader for ENCA, and then she's on the 98.7 Power FM breakfast show. She was with the late Bob Mabena. So she's a powerhouse individual who has come herself from previously disadvantaged family and has built herself up. And together with her, we are building this institute, which we hope to roll out from Joburg to South Africa to the rest of Africa thereafter. So that's from Tali. And I think we had one last question.
My last question, I suppose, to wrap up our conversation is, you spoke a lot around the importance of introducing creativity in schools. Now, what I'd like to understand is, from a practical perspective, what do educators need to do in order to upskill themselves or understand all the things that you've been speaking about from a creativity perspective? So it's all good and well that Lana told them all about creativity, but what is that first step that they need to do in order to try make teaching learners about creativity a lot more practical?
So I'm actually going to take that question together with a comment from Ernest, because if you can all see in the chat section, Ernest is saying it's a broad topic. It involves some amount of risk. And I think that is the key word, risk. We don't like to take risks. Yeah. We are creatures of habit. We learn things, we play the same rules, and you can go through life that way. It's fine. Some people it works. No two ways about it. You play the rules by everyone else, and then you have me, who can't play by rules, who, since she was a young child, asked why and questioned things. You know, I was often labeled, Ernest, as stubborn. In most of the companies I work with, and most of them with males, interesting enough, in the tech world, especially in the earlier years. And they often used to call me stubborn. And I said, why am I stubborn? He said, because we told you to do it this way, and you went and did it a different way. And I said, but look at the success. Yeah, but you should have done it this way, and this is the way we do it, and this is the way we do things. And yes, with risk comes reward. That's the truth. And sometimes creativity, it is risky. And that's why I spoke about failure, is that what you have to think, what if I take this risk? What is the worst that can happen? Yeah, you can fail. Yes, I get it. It's different when you got students and you got to put them through at a university. You got to get them a university pass. And this is the problem. We are so fixated on getting these children to matric, then into university, and then they are made individuals. Then they're okay. Then we've done our job. And do you know how many unsuccessful university graduates can't find jobs now? So life now is about taking those risks. I think we've hit that but they need to be calculated risks. So, you can't just totally be a risk taker. And Thabo, I guess that answers the question, is that where do you start?
Yeah.
Where do you start with creativity? But with creativity, you first got to acknowledge that it's something that you can build. That not that person has creativity, not that person. I'm just not creative. That's just a belief. It's you measuring yourself against some other people and saying, I'm just not creative. So, I'm not the creative type. That's rubbish.
Yeah, got you.
First is to understand a belief system that everyone is creative. Everyone has the ability to be creative. You just need to ask, how do I start? And I think, I've tried to go through as much as I can in this short time, just to tell you that you can be. You just got to start practicing those different ways of thinking and asking and being curious and mashing up and thinking of different ways to do things.
100%.
And yes, some of them might involve risk. Some of them might. You might fail. But hell, if you don't try, you're never going to learn. I don't know if that
100%.
answers your question, Ernest.
Yeah.
Yes, it does. Thank you, Lana.
Pleasure.
Cool. No, thanks so much, Lana, for that. I'll open up the floor now to some questions and comments besides the ones that we've been receiving throughout the conversation from both Ernest and Otwa. Are there any other further questions, clarifications or comments that anybody on this call has got before we wrap up? No hands up. Cool. Clifford, you look like you want to say something.
I couldn't help laughing while you were talking, and I could hear the hardy-dar in the background.
Yeah, as you can see, I'm sitting in the beautiful sunshine of South Africa outside with two of my dogs sleeping and the hardy-dars entertaining us.
I just wanted to put my hand up that I thought of a bird. I needed the prompt.
Now you've thought of a bird, a hardy-dar.
What I was thinking about while you were talking is, everyone is looking for consistency and predictability, which is maybe why we don't embrace the risk of change. And I think the COVID lockdown has been this huge wake up that has actually forced on all of us to virtually rethink everything. The way we relate to people, the way we work, the way we deliver, and so on and so forth. And, it's scary to think that such an existential issue had to occur to maybe force everybody to wake up, and in some respects, it may well be that people now take on climate change with a much greater sense of realism, just of how big an existential threat this might be. And it is possible to change. It is possible to do things differently. You were talking about being called into discovery to help them meet less or meet shorter. And I think actually all of us have learned that we can work differently, that in fact the technology has always been there. The fact that we could work remotely, the fact that we don't all have to be at the office at the same time is all actually possible. But none of us really crossed that line until we were faced with this, existential challenge. And I think in some respects that might be the good that's come from COVID. Is
100%. Life has dealt us COVID.
Yeah.
Because I think prior to COVID, if I have heard so many people on the edge of a meltdown, and I think I was one of them, and saying, I can't do this anymore. I just can't. I'm running here, 2 kids, this. And I actually probably just before COVID was literally on a meltdown. And COVID happened and all of a sudden we slowed down. Yes, it's brought with it its own problems now from an economic standpoint, but it's something to us. It's like literally here on a platter. I'm telling you, think differently now. Do things differently. This is your chance. Here's your platter. We're serving it to you. Don't mess up now. Don't go back to your old habits. Don't go back to your old ways. Don't use online teaching and normal teaching at the same time, providing there's Wi-Fi and availability of practical ways to deliver online content. Don't go back to just pure face-to-face content. Change the way that the desks are structured. Maybe now desks should be in a round circle and structure things differently. It's your time. You've been given this on a platter.
100%.
Yeah, that's how I feel. And I would like maybe everyone who's been on this, because at the end of the day, we all attend these webinars and we all attend many talks, and they are good and we learn a lot. But the minute you leave here, just think to yourself, just give me one thing that I can do different, whether it's my students, or if I am my own student, if I am a student, what can I do differently? Like, just think of one creative thing that if you're going to teach a class, one thing? Because the minute you just start with one thing, you're committing now, this second, to being, or starting a creative process. Commit now. Before you leave, as you're leaving this, just think to yourself, write down one thing that you will do that is going to be creative, that's going to be something different, that your students, that the classes, whatever you teach, are going to walk out of there and say, thank you, Ernest, for that opportunity, for letting us experiment in that way. That was so creative. Thank you. Write it down now, because otherwise this is just another lecture, and this is just another webinar, and this is just another talk that you say, oh, nice talk. It was very interesting. She was very interesting. She gave an interesting point. But I'm not interested in interesting. I'm interested in action. And Thabo, I don't know if you agree with me on that.
No, absolutely. What you just said, Lana, reminds me of two quotes. So the first one is a Japanese proverb that says that a vision without action is a daydream, and an action without vision is a nightmare. So that basically talks about the importance of, one, applying, and number two, in that application, you need to apply yourself mentally in how you apply things. Now, the second thing around knowledge not being enough, but application is key, is a quote by, I'm an avid martial arts, I follow martial arts avidly or passionately, and Bruce Lee has this quote where he says that knowledge or knowing is not enough, we must apply. So that's the big thing. I absolutely echo your words, Lana, around implementing or applying that which you learn. And it doesn't have to be to the nth degree, but to just start. Just start, and the momentum will start building. And funny enough, it reminds me of another quote that one of our business partners says at FutureWorld, and he says that start with momentum and direction will follow, because we're often so fixated on what direction should we take. And that speaks to the fear of failure that you spoke about earlier on, Lana, as well as the fearing of experimentation or experimenting, the risk behind it. But in order for us to understand truly what the risks are or where the risks lie, we need to get started or start so that we can tweak the direction and the approach that we need to take. So I absolutely agree with what you just said.
Thank you. So yes. No, I was just to say, time is now. Momentum is now.
100%. Cool.
So Thabo, before we wrap then, maybe let me just do a little advert for next week and just say, I'm not sure what you would call what you've just spoken, whether they would be parables or proverbs or sayings or slogans, but they were quite nice. And I think you should share them. I mean, I think you should jot those down. Actually, you clearly work with some very smart people with some very handy phrasing, and they were quite good. I think you should share them with us.
Yeah, no problem.
I like the one about the nightmare. Anyway, just before everyone jumps off the call, can I remind all of you that we're going to be here next week, again at 3 o'clock with the online stage. And I think we have been struggling, just to borrow from Thabo, we've been struggling to gain momentum on that particular platform, which has really been created for learners to give us their own feedback, both in terms of public speaking and performance. So can I encourage those teachers? And maybe we're wrong because you're all math teachers, but I think Lana has given you license now to think creatively and not just to see yourself as being formulaic and driven by a methodology that you have to repeat. Can I invite the math teachers to join us in the creative session next week? And please bring your learners with us, because I think the conversations are what's creating, interest and a dynamic. And just to thank Laura, I found the session really, really interesting, and I think your insights were fantastic. And I think you did bring it back to the fact that, yes, there is real life around us, and I think we've got to work out how to be more creative within the constraints that we still face. So guys, thank you very much. And then Tabo, maybe if you just want to wrap.
Cool. Thanks so much for that, Clifford. Appreciate it. And thanks again for your time, Lana. Really appreciate it. And thank you to you guys for dialing into this call, because without you, there would be no call, because we do this call for you. And we're looking forward to having a lot more learners on this call, because to Clifford's point, they could gain tons from these sessions that we're having. And that's the point around having these sessions. It's about creating a partnership between both educators as well as learners in order for you to truly harness the power of the future, especially because we're currently in 4IR. And thank you, Lana, for your contact details there in the chat. So feel free to reach out to Lana if you have any further questions about what she spoke about today. And we're looking forward to 2 more sessions from a world of work perspective. So look out for the invites as well as the flyers from Bronwyn over the next couple of weeks. So there are 2 more sessions of that left over. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you in the rest of the calls that are left, as well as the sessions that we're having, as Clifford mentioned, next week. And please do encourage your learners to join as well. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Looking forward to seeing you in future sessions.
Thank you so much, everyone. And anytime you need to chat or come up with ideas or just need help, I'm really just an email away.